Good morning, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us this morning on Community Connection. We're going to do another installment of hashtag Make Foster Care Obsolete.
Look at you being all cool with the hashtag.
I am cool with the hashtag. I'm so millennial. Anyway, we have with us today the co-hostess with the mostess, Claudia Fletcher.
Hello, Robert J. Day.
Good morning. So, do you know what I mean when I say make foster care obsolete?
I think I've heard you say it a few times.
Just because I say it doesn't mean you understand it.
I understand it.
Okay.
Do you want me to explain it? No, you need to explain it.
Well, I will, but it's a little bit better than what I used to say, isn't that right?
That's for sure. Should I tell that story?
Yes, please tell that story.
So when we first started talking about this whole idea of what it would look like if we made foster care obsolete, Mr. Day was not talking about making it obsolete. He was talking about obliterating the child welfare industrial complex. And we kind of said, hey, you may not want to use that language very much. But several weeks later, I was at a meeting with the director of DSS trying to get
the top
state, like in charge of the deputy, whatever his title was, trying to give him a sneak preview as to what we were looking at as far as Vision 30 before it was called that. And he said, oh, I already overheard your CEO telling somebody that you guys are going to obliterate the child welfare industrial complex. I said, no, he didn't. And it turned out that you were talking to a former DSS director, and he overheard you. You didn't say it in public. But I just thought, of all the things in front of all the, of all the people to hear that, the state director has to believe that you're out to obliterate him. So that was pretty funny.
So make foster care obsolete's a little
Less
more
threatening.
nuanced, right?
A little less militaristic.
Yeah. But there's a lot of folks who actually are going down that road.
Yeah, I hear you've been creeping on Twitter, like checking it out and finding out some of the interesting people that are there. So what do they have to say?
Well, if you'd have told me 6 months ago that I would be on Twitter, I'd say, oh, God, it's not going to happen. I just was never interested. I could see the power of Twitter because every news outlet will quote somebody who said something on Twitter, right? And it was always about politics. And I just thought, I'm not interested in that, and it just seems to be a big war going on back and forth. But I don't know, I felt some need to get on, and I became a member of Twitter on the day that Elon Musk took over. So there was all this angst and craziness going on Twitter. People wanted to leave. Oh, no, we're going to lose free speech. And others going, yay, we finally have free speech. Anyway, I tried to avoid all of that. And I started following people who spoke to me in various ways in this space, this foster care space. And at first, they were a lot of victims of abuse, or I should say survivors of abuse. They'd rather be called survivors than victims, and I think that's appropriate.
Yeah.
But they're in all stages of recovery and healing from that. And some of them are living some pretty troubled lives. And Twitter is like this just open space where they can be themselves and people can respond or do whatever they want. Mostly it's a supportive network of survivors who are trying to share their own stories and figure out how do I get better?
Right.
So then with this is all of these supportive caretakers type therapists, clinical social workers, counselors, mental health folks, trauma-informed people who were on there tweeting about that. And so there's this interaction between those who've been abused and those who are working with abuse. So I'm learning a lot from watching that. There's some educators in the mix because they work with kids. They're interested in those kind of things. Those were some of my first followers, people who followed me. But quickly I saw that there was a group on Twitter that call themselves abolitionists that really want to obliterate the child welfare industrial complex.
Right.
Very militaristic types of language, and they're growing in terms of their influence.
Fueled by anger, do you think? Are they at that stage where they're just angry?
Some of them are angry because they were in the system.
Right.
Some of them are coming from a justice perspective,
Okay.
who've never experienced the system, but they see it as a type of policing, family policing. And so they're just doing it from a justice perspective. But there's actually a lot more credible groups out there than you would think involved in this. The former dean of the social work department at Rutgers University was a huge abolitionist. In fact, he got fired supposedly because he was an abolitionist, and the college kept saying, you kind of maybe need to calm down a little bit. He didn't. This same, quote, abolitionist movement is taking over many college campuses. The University of Michigan social work department, very clearly, we're abolitionists. Foster care needs to go away. So there's this academic side, there's this kind of justice side, then there's
do
the
these-
victim abuse survivor side.
So do these people have an alternative? Like, what are they gonna? If we get rid of the system, what's going to happen to
Yeah.
the kids who need some help? Do they have an
That's-
answer?
No, that's the scary part.
Okay.
So it reminds me a lot of the defund police, right, that happened after George Floyd. You could understand the anger, you could tap into the injustice of all of that, but that seemed to be kind of a wild response to it. So something is waking up a large group of people in our society to the injustice of foster care, right? It's broken beyond repair. It's corrupt beyond cleansing. It's unjust beyond reconciliation. People are beginning to realize that, whether they've touched the system or not. But they don't have a lot of alternatives other than just make it go away, burn it down kind of idea. So to make foster care obsolete is a different nuance than abolitionist kinds of thinking. It's saying we want the same goal. We want a future without foster care. But foster care should just become obsolete because it's being replaced by a new system. So rather than just attacking it all the time, and I'm posting on there and I'm talking about all the same things they're talking about, I'm trying to provide some solutions and some alternatives. And it's starting to catch some credibility with people, those who've been in the system, those who not. The strange part about all of this is all the foster care agencies who are on Twitter, completely silent to all of this. All you do, you just see them post every day, hey, you want to be a foster parent? Look at this pretty 12-year-old. Grow your family through foster care.
Right.
They don't address the problems. They don't even recognize it or acknowledge that they're part of a broken system. And there's no talk about how do we prevent kids from coming into the system, right? So they're so enmeshed in the system that they just keep perpetuating the same thing.
Right. It's almost like when cigarettes, when they first realized that they killed us, right? Then the Surgeon General made them put a warning on. But that didn't mean they still didn't do commercials because they're going to go out of business. And I think people that we've talked to, as we've talked Vision 30 about making foster care obsolete, there are a lot of people who are 100% on board with that idea because they can see a future where they would still have jobs, but that they would be working in prevention. But the ones who can't see how they would sustain their own livelihood are not willing to jump in and say, yeah, let's make it obsolete because they can't see how. What are they going to do if they don't have a job? Like the cigarette manufacturers aren't going to stop pushing cigarettes, right? We're not going to stop pushing this because it's our livelihood and it's how we
Yes.
make it from day to day.
And so there's all kinds of folks on that spectrum of why they're involved in this. And I don't think many of them are consciously thinking about the harm that they do or that they're participating in a system that is harmful. The same gentleman that I mentioned, the former dean of the School of Social Work at Rutgers University, he was part of a group of mental health professionals, psychologists, clinical social workers, who produced a paper based on research in 2018 that basically said child separation from their family is equal to torture. Now, they weren't talking about physical torture. They were talking about a psychological, emotional torture that stays with the child for a very long time. It's part of that trauma that we're talking about. So a child may be being neglected or kind of on the edge of abuse. They come into a system. Just think about it. Parents are messing up, but it's the child who pays the price. And it's like sending them to jail for what their parents did. So they carry the shame on that. Their self-identity is threatened. These are my people. This is my family. Then what does that mean about me? So it goes very, very deep. Well, if we really believe that, right, if there's good scientific research to suggest that removing children from their family, no matter what the reason is equal to torture, why would we want to keep doing that? So that's where we're at. But how does a system even come to acknowledge that when there's billions and billions of dollars flowing through the system to keep it maintained as it is?
And you have all the answers, right?
I don't have all the answers. But one of the reasons I joined Twitter is I'm learning. I'm open to hearing the struggles of the survivors, and I'm listening to all these different groups and their perspectives, and I can see grains of truth in many of them. So how do we bring this together in some kind of cohesive way that we can build a strategy to make this possible? And so, I need to clarify that when I say make foster care obsolete, we've got to do it while keeping kids safe. Right. And that's why we say obsolete rather than abolition, because we're going to keep kids safe in this process. There are kids in the system. They've got to be kept safe. The ones in the system, those in families who, right, are at risk, they've got to be kept safe. Why we build this new thing. That's what we're trying to do. So you created this video we're going to get to watch that our staff have seen
a few times,
dozens of times. But I'm going to ask, particularly my staff, I want you to watch this video. Try to watch it from a fresh perspective. Because when we come back, I'm going to talk about a perspective I have about this image that we use, this illustration, that may explain this industrial complex and what we got to do to make it different, okay? So guys, if we could show the video.
Nobody gets to choose their family. If a person is fortunate enough to be born into a healthy family, then life can be much like floating down a smooth, gentle river in the summertime. But an unhealthy family is like a dangerous river, filled with rocks, debris, and fast-moving water. This river swiftly leads to the steep waterfall of adulthood, tragically forming a new river of dysfunction. Even if you aren't born into an unhealthy river, there are many streams that cause a person to get there. But there is only one way to get out, and that is through a meaningful relationship. Across our region, there are many agencies, churches, and families who are devoted to helping children escape from unhealthy rivers. Some feel their role is to wade in and rescue children. They foster, adopt, or provide safe families. Others stand by the river and support the rescuers by providing what they need. Still, others are upstream and stand in the gap to keep children from ending up in the negative situations. At Patrick Henry Family Services, we see ourselves as having an additional role. We are running up and down the shores of the unhealthy river, screaming, "Can't you see the children in the water? You have to do something." Vision 30 is a 10-year initiative. By 2030, we envision a region where all children are safe in their own family, or with caregivers who are supported by a local faith community. So, where do you stand at the river? Are you upstream, keeping families together and strong by standing in the gap? Are you in the river, directly impacting children? Are you on the shore, providing support for the brave folks who have entered the river? Or are you just passing by without noticing? No matter who you are, come down to the river with us. Let us help you find your place. Not only will lives be changed, but you will never be the same.
So good job on creating that, Claudia.
Thank you. It was a while ago.
Well, it has spoken to a lot of people, right? People watch that the first time and go, that makes a lot of sense.
Right.
So I want to use what we created and add something to it. So guys, if we could put up that spot. So here we are. And it's showing that second river, right, the dangerous river. Now, if we were to superimpose the child welfare industrial complex, right, it's on the right side of that river. And it has camped out all along that river. It has built systems and organizations, both profit and nonprofit, government, private agencies, even faith-based, right? They're all up and down that river. And they are fishing that river. Not so much with the goal of ever draining that river. Right? They go down the river and they feed the hungry kid, but the kid keeps going on down the river. Right? They'll go down the river and pull them out and dry them off and then put them back in the river. That's how the system's designed, because everybody there is getting paid and making a profit or raising a lot of money in the name of servicing all those who are down the river. So what would actually happen, right, if we went upriver and just drained that thing, build a dam and just drain that? That whole system comes under threat. And so the challenge is to ignore that side of it. And right now we show the arrow, right? We escape by coming out of that river and going over to the first river, the healthy river.
Yep.
But the challenge is there's not an arrow from that first river going over. All the help is from folks who have a financial reason to be there. Even if there is some kind of altruistic motive, right? Even you and I are making a living doing that. How do we get the healthy folks from the healthy side of the river to beeline over there so that there are pathways back and forth? And it's got to be more volunteer driven, professionally supported, but volunteer driven. It's got to come from bottom up solutions, community solutions, natural helping network solutions, because the industrial complex is not interested in it. Think about this. You know the illustration about give a person a fish they eat for a day, right? Teach them to fish they eat for a lifetime. So think of it this way. Give an orphan a fish and she'll eat for a day. Teach an orphan to fish and she'll be an orphan who can feed herself, but she'll still be an orphan.
Right.
Give an orphan a family, a thriving family, preferably her own family. Not only will she eat every day, she'll learn how to fish, and she'll never struggle or suffer from being an orphan, which is a lot deeper wound than not being able to eat. Right? So that river, there's the urgency is in that river. That's where they're all at. And so urgency keeps us at the river. Our jobs keep us at the river. Our capacities keep us at the river. It is very hard to turn away from all of that and go upstream against our own self-interest, but also the interest of what's happening in that river. It's hard to turn away from that and go upstream. That's what we've got to do to make foster care obsolete. Now, as the Chief Program Officer of Patrick Henry Family Services, how do you envision us as an organization turning more attention about going upstream so the kids either don't get in the river or they get out of that river very quickly as to not get all that nasty water in their lungs that they'll do with the rest of their lives?
Wow, that's a pretty intense question. I think there's one piece that makes it really hard, and that is that some of the people who are in the river are so deeply in the river. Some of these children and their families are so deep in that river that they're pulling some of the professionals in with them, and they're drowning. And there's too many in the river, and there's not enough people to help them. And I think that part of the decision is always, do I save this child, or do I walk away from this child and decide that child is going to have to be left there so that I can go upriver, because a lot of times there's not resources to do both. So I think even forcing people to acknowledge that there may be some people in the river we're just not going to be able to save, that we've got to focus upstream, is really tough for people.
It's hard
who are,
even to say that, isn't it?
yeah, it's hard to say I'm going to walk away from this child to save, 25 years from now, right? And I think that people who are in these professions, I mean, when you call it an industrial complex, it just turns it into this mass of stick figures on the side, but really they're real people who have real big hearts, and that's why they're in this world. That's why they're trying to do this stuff. And the closer that they get to the river and the more they get entrenched in it, the more they feel like they're drowning, and that there's a crisis there on that side.
But they are people who are caught up in a system that is self-perpetuating, right?
Right.
And there's only so much they can do because of the regulations, the bureaucracy, the funding, the way the system's set up. So a lot of good-hearted people get burned out trying to work through the system to reach these kids.
Yeah, and then they might want to change it, but they don't have the power to change it, and so a lot of those people leave it. And then if the people who are perpetually frustrated by the system leave it, what happens, right? Yeah. And so I think that the answer is in that meaningful relationship arrow, and it's changing how many people we can get to come from the healthy river over in that volunteer capacity to be willing to get close enough to the river to pull someone out. And it's counterintuitive to do that, right? Why would I leave safety, security? Why would I want to do that when it's going to be hard, when it isn't going to go well, when it's a risk? I'm fine, thank you very much, in my comfortable world. And we've in the church, we've spent decades making church cool and consumeristic, where I'm going to go shopping for a church that meets my needs. And I think COVID has shown that the people who were in churches for that reason, to get what I can get out of them, they stopped going because they can watch it from their recliner in their pajamas now. They don't have to go. But churches have less resources internally to keep their programs going, so they don't want to release people to come down to the river because we need you to do what we need to do. So I think that as we're moving forward, we just need to keep getting the word out about how many people it's going to take that are willing to come without getting paid to and do what they need to do. I tell this story often, but it still touches my heart that one of the girls that I met as a person, as a volunteer for Care Portal from my church, she and I were having lunch, and she said, "I've been thinking about this, and you're the only person outside of my family who's ever cared about me that didn't get paid to." And that's what the people we need. We need people who are willing to come down to the river without getting paid to, and I tell social workers when I talk about Care Portal, you should do it as a person, because it's so freeing to not have any rules, to not be part of a system, to do whatever you want, to help someone without having to, make case notes and do all that. You can, as a person, make a difference in your spare time. So I think that the key of all of this is, how are we going to find those people who really want to be the hands and feet of Jesus, that are willing to do tough things to get the reward, to take the pressure off the ones who are perpetually bound by the system to keep the cycle going. How are we going to get them? And then, as you've said, as many of our programs that we can be upstream with, where we're looking at how do we keep these kids from getting from healthy situations into unhealthy, or who are at the brink of unhealthy, how do we stop them here and pull that back into health and work with those families?
Yeah, I was a pastor in the 90s when the whole
seeker sensitive?
Yeah, seeker sensitive, right?
Yeah.
Seeker friendly came about, and now we are this many decades later, and that model is proved not to be sustainable, right? We build a consumer Christianity, and then surprised that our consumers have decided to consume something different,
Right.
or just quit consuming at all.
Right.
So just going to the local church to solve this problem is not going to be the answer, is it? It's got to be much wider than that.
Yeah.
But isn't that the thing? I think what I've noticed in my Twitterverse is that no matter where they're at, how they identify themselves on there, they care about kids. And I've got folks who identify as ultra woke. I've got MAGAs on there, right? Politically, they have nothing in common, but they are interested in this thing called making foster care obsolete. They come from their own perspective, but they're at least rallying over, we ought to do better for these kids.
Right.
Now, if we could keep them from making it a political and just everybody jumping in and doing something, that would be a beautiful thing. So it's really got to be a movement more than a program or a system or an institution, doesn't it?
And that's one of the things we talk about with Vision 30 all the time. We say, if you agree with this statement, with this vision, how you do it and what you believe politically, because there's so few things that you can meet a person and agree with them 100% on everything, right? Because we're dichotomized, we're polarized in our thinking in every way right now. And so if we can pull people together that says, this is what the goal is. If you believe in the goal, I don't care how you do it. I don't care what you believe doctrinally. I don't care what you believe politically. If you're for kids, I think it's Frederick Douglass said this, and I'm going to botch it up a little bit, but I would work with anyone to do right and with no one to do wrong.
That's right.
And that's kind of where we've approached Vision 30. It's going to take all of us that are willing to focus on that goal, despite our disagreements about all the other things, and just unite upon this idea that, we should care for vulnerable kids and we should keep them safe. And if people can do that and focus on that, I mean, all the things we argue about just take time away from doing the real work that we believe God's called us to do, which is to take care of those kids.
There's something universal about it. All the major religions, right, have a mandate, an orphan mandate. Judaism, Christianity, Islam, others have this orphan mandate. But even non-religious folks have a heart for vulnerable kids.
Yeah, there's a 99.5% of the entire population believes that we should help vulnerable children. So, and you don't want to think about who the 0.5%, what the kind of people they are, right? It's just common sense that that's what we want to do.
Yeah. Well, it seems impossible. Is it impossible? Are we dreaming without any realistic?
Well, one of my favorite things to say is if we only do things that we can do on our own, we don't need God to show up.
That's right.
And when we do things that are impossible, that's when he shows up. One of my favorite mentors and friends always used to say, when God wants to do something great, he starts with a problem. When he wants to do something phenomenal, he starts with an impossibility.
That's where we're at. So who wouldn't want to join this movement, right?
I can't figure out who wouldn't want to.
Yeah. Well, I think it comes down to people either don't believe it's a problem, but everything I can see from my research is most everybody believes that there's a problem with foster care. So the next thing is, if you believe it is a problem, do you believe it's your problem? And that's where we got to convince people to believe that it is their problem. And now if we can convince them it's their problem, the next thing is, okay, is there any possibility or anything I can do to even fix this problem, right? Because it seems so big. So we got to convince them it is their problem and that they can do something about it. And it doesn't have to be big and grand. You don't have to have these systems and bureaucracies and laws and money. It is truly about relationships and people caring for one another, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Claudia, for having this conversation with me today about obliterating the child welfare industrial complex.
Well, and it's a tough conversation, and we probably have said several things in the last half hour that will bother people.
Yep.
But sometimes getting bothered about something leads to action, and that's not a bad thing.
Not a bad thing. All right, folks, do something to help a vulnerable child or a distressed family this week. Do it not because you're getting paid for it, but do it because it's the right thing. Do it because God's calling you to do it because it's in your heart to do it. And we'll see you next Thursday. God bless.
Nobody gets to choose their family. If a person is fortunate enough to be born into a healthy family, then life can be much like floating down a smooth, gentle river in the summertime. But an unhealthy family is like a dangerous river, filled with rocks, debris, and fast-moving water. This river swiftly leads to the steep waterfall of adulthood, tragically forming a new river of dysfunction. Even if you aren't born into an unhealthy river, there are many streams that cause a person to get there. But there is only one way to get out, and that is through a meaningful relationship. Across our region, there are many agencies, churches, and families who are devoted to helping children escape from unhealthy rivers. Some feel their role is to wade in and rescue children. They foster, adopt, or provide safe families. Others stand by the river and support the rescuers by providing what they need. Still, others are upstream and stand in the gap to keep children from ending up in the negative situations. At Patrick Henry Family Services, we see ourselves as having an additional role. We are running up and down the shores of the unhealthy river, screaming, "Can't you see the children in the water? You have to do something." Vision 30 is a 10-year initiative. By 2030, we envision a region where all children are safe in their own family, or with caregivers who are supported by a local faith community. So, where do you stand at the river? Are you upstream, keeping families together and strong by standing in the gap? Are you in the river, directly impacting children? Are you on the shore, providing support for the brave folks who have entered the river? Or are you just passing by without noticing? No matter who you are, come down to the river with us. Let us help you find your place. Not only will lives be changed, but you will never be the same.